What up? Good afternoon. I invite the delegates to take seat, please. Invito a las delegaciones a tomar asiento. Comenzamos la reunión, por favor.
I'd kindly ask you to take your seats so that we can begin the meeting.
Soy la embajadora Silvia.
Let me introduce myself. I'm the Ambassador Madame Alfaro, Vice Chair of this conference, and I will be chairing in name of the Ambassador Mbesine, who will not be able to accompany us this afternoon.
Honor of multilingualism turning to Spanish. ¿Qué pasó con los míos? No, mis papeles. Mis papeles. ¿Por qué me los...? No, dame los míos. Mis papeles. Ya llegó. Eso. Excelencias, distinguidos delegados.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, I would like to declare open the third plenary session of the 7th Conference of State Parties. Before taking up the items of today's agenda, I'd like to make the following announcements regarding the modifications we've had to introduce into the agenda. On Monday, we went over time, but nonetheless, we were unable to cover items beyond item 4. We were unable to finish the list of speakers we had published. Item 4 of the agenda was finalized on Monday, but the chair, together with the vice chairs, have come to the decision that we will give the speakers pending on that list the possibility of addressing the Conference of State Parties today. And that will happen after item 8 of today's agenda and before we cover item 9. The delegations that will intervene are the following: UNDOC, the International League of Women for Peace and Freedom, WILPF, Arms Control or Control Arms, MAT for Peace, Freedom, Development and Human Rights, Nigeria, ASER, and Cameroon. Let me repeat this list. UNDOC, the International League of Women for Peace, WILPF, Control Arms, MAT, Nigeria, ASER, and Cameroon. I'd like delegations to resume their statements and to send the Secretariat their statements so that we can publish them online on the ATT's website. This afternoon, we will continue with agenda item 7, that is, matters pertaining to the Secretariat, and we will go through the speakers list for this agenda item as published yesterday. On our list, we have 4 speakers, namely the UK, Japan, the European Union, and the Republic of Korea. I will be closing the speakers list under this agenda item in 5 minutes. Therefore, delegations that would like to speak under this item are requested to indicate so as soon as possible.
Agradeceré tomar muy especial nota.
Please note that statements need to be shorter than 2 minutes 30 seconds. We are running out of time. We need to listen to all the speakers on the list, and I will be strict if necessary, so that you limit your statements to 2.5 minutes. Without much ado, I will now call upon the UK to take the floor.
Por favor, United Kingdom, you have the floor. Ambassador Aden.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be giving the statement for the UK on the budget agenda item. Thank you for giving me the floor. The UK would like to thank the Secretariat for the preparation of the 2022 budget proposal. While we understand the impact of currency fluctuations, we are concerned that the proposed budget increase of 12%. This is a significant rise in a time of difficult economic circumstances. We ask that the Secretariat makes every effort going forward to consider measures to minimize budget increases. For example, consideration might be given as to how to best manage rising staff, travel, and administrative costs. The late payment or non-payment of assessed contributions by states parties clearly has a detrimental effect on budget planning. We call on all states parties to meet their financial obligations in good time. This is essential in order to support the organisation in delivering implementation of the Arms Trade Treaty. We are concerned that the uncertainty caused by delays in the payment of assessed contributions might lead to overestimating budget requirements. We understand and support the decision of CSP7 that unspent funds are returned to the states parties that have paid their contributions, but we do not consider overestimating costs to be a sound and sustainable method of budget planning. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, United Kingdom. Gracias.
Thank you. The next speaker on my list is Japan.
Please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Japan appreciates the work of the Secretariat to enable the treaty body to continue its multiple functions, and especially for organizing the CSP, the preparatory meeting, and other occasions of our discussions. It is thanks to the reliable and precise work of the Secretariat that our discussions have been proceeding smoothly, including through online modalities, despite the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. Japan would also like to thank the Secretariat for the formulation of the proposed budget for 2022. On this occasion, we would like to mention that for all the international organizations and entities, Japan's basic position on their budget is zero nominal growth. Even in the case of necessary increase, we normally request efficient budget formulation and implementation by absorbing any increase through scrap and build or other cost-saving efforts. As for the proposed budget for 2022, the Management Committee, including Japan, gave consent to the distribution of the current proposal despite an increase from this year's budget, based on the considerations for the adverse fluctuation of the exchange rate and the concerns raised within the Management Committee that savings made on the budget might possibly limit the capacity and function of the Secretariat. In order to maintain and reinforce the stable and effective function of the Secretariat, each and every state needs to pay its assessed contribution in a timely manner. Once again, Japan would like to stress the importance of each state fulfilling its financial obligation. Please rest assured that even under the current difficult financial circumstances, Japan will continue to comply with its obligations under this valuable treaty. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Japan. Gracias, Japón. A continuación tiene la
Thank you, Japan.
la Unión Europea, European Union, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Vice President. I have the honor to speak on behalf of the European Union and its member states. The candidate countries Turkey, the Republic of North Macedonia, Montenegro, Serbia, and Albania, the country of the Stabilization and Association Process and potential candidate Bosnia and Herzegovina, and the EFTA countries, Iceland and Norway, members of the European Economic Area, as well as Georgia, align themselves with this statement. On 19th April 2021, the EU decided to provide new funding for the effective implementation of the Arms Trade Treaty. With a contribution of 1.37 million euro, the EU finances 3 projects implemented by the ATT Secretariat in order to strengthen treaty implementation and local expertise regarding the ATT. The EU support will enable the following actions: training local and regional ATT experts to deliver implementation assistance and reduce reliance on external consultants, creating a database to match treaty implementation needs and resources, and building IT and communications mechanisms to help states parties' points of contact and the ATT Secretariat to collaborate more effectively. The project also strengthens the ATT Secretariat's institutional capacities to provide sustainable support to states parties. The project is part of the EU's recently adopted broader strategy to strengthen the EU's contribution to rules-based multilateralism by promoting global peace and security. We look forward to continuing our close cooperation with the ATT Secretariat in the context of this new project and look forward to see first results. The project will be officially launched on Thursday, 2nd September, during a side event to the CSP7 at 11:30, and you are all cordially invited to participate at this event. Thank you, Madam Vice President.
Thank you, European Union. Thank you for the invitation. Next speaker, siguiente orador, República de Corea.
The next speaker is the Republic of Korea.
Yeah.
Thank you for giving me the floor, Madam Vice President. I would like to express my deep gratitude to the Secretariat for its hard work, without which we could never have been able to realize an efficient continuation of our work. The Republic of Korea believes that efficiency is crucial to the work of international organizations and recognizes that the ATT has sought to pursue robust governance and efficiency in its budget administration. We are of the view that it is necessary to examine the costs reduced due to COVID-19 and to consider measures to reduce budget which will not negatively affect the work of the ATT. Some examples include using a virtual meeting tool where available and feasible, or going further, paper smart. The Republic of Korea also believes it is essential for state parties to pay their full financial contribution in a timely manner to sustain the work of the ATT. Furthermore, we believe the voluntary trust fund and the sponsorship program are practical tools to incentivize states, particularly developing countries outside the ATT, to join and help implement the treaty. In this regard, the Republic of Korea is pleased to inform states parties of its contribution of another $100,000 to the Voluntary Trust Fund and to sponsorship program this year, and we will make a continuous efforts for further contributions. Thank you.
Thank you, Korea. Gracias. Termina aquí.
Thank you very much, Korea. With this, we have finished the list of speakers on this item. Would any other delegation like to take the floor? If not, Excellencies, let me
del programa.
go forward with the following item: transparency and reporting. The reporting, as disposed in Article 13, is one of the main features of this treaty. These reports enable us to understand to what extent states respect their obligations. The session will commence with the ATT Secretariat overview presentation on the current status of reporting under the treaty. After this, I will invite the co-chairs of the Working Group on Transparency and Reporting to provide a report to the conference on the status of work conducted by the working group in the intersessional period, including proposals contained in their report. This will be followed by delegations' exchange of views on the working group report. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, without much ado, I'd like to invite the Secretariat to provide the overview presentation on the current reporting status under the treaty. You have the floor, Secretariat.
Thank you, Ambassador, for the opportunity for the Secretariat to deliver this presentation on the status of reporting. I have my colleague Sarah Parker here to do the presentation. Over to you.
Good morning, everyone. I would like to start by thanking the co-chairs for the invitation to the Secretariat to give an overview of the current status of ATT reporting. The slides that I'm about to run through are already included in Annex F of the co-chair's draft report to CSP7, which starts on page 87, for any of you that made it that far into the report. I have updated the figures, so they are current today. So the figures you see on the screen will be slightly different from those in the annex. Now, as you will all recall, Article 13(1) of the treaty requires each state party to submit an initial report on its implementation of the treaty within 1 year of the treaty entering into force. In addition, Article 13(3) requires states parties to submit an annual report on their imports and exports. I'm going to start with initial reports, giving both a global overview as well as a regional breakdown. And then I'm going to do the same with the annual reports, giving the global picture and then a regional breakdown. Next slide, please. So starting with the initial reports, to date we have 110 states parties, and 105 of them should have submitted an initial report by now. That is 95% of states parties. 81 states parties have submitted their initial report, so this means that 77% of states parties that were due to report have done so. 24 states that should have submitted their initial report by now have not yet done so, that is 23%. On the next slide, we have provided some additional information on initial reports. As you will recall, states parties have the option to request that their initial report not be made public. 17 states have requested that their initial reports not be made public. That is 21% of initial reports submitted. In August last year, that figure was at 18%. So these reports are available to states parties on the restricted area of the website only. We have also indicated whether initial reports were submitted on time. With respect to the initial reports we have received so far, 42 of them were received on time or before they were due, that is 52%. And finally, a total of 67 states that submitted their initial reports, that is 84%, used the reporting template that was endorsed by CSP2 in their submissions. Article 13 also stipulates that states parties shall report on any new measures undertaken to implement the treaty when appropriate. So far, 5 states parties have submitted updated initial reports. Moving on to the next slide, I'm going to take a look at regional reporting, or reporting at the regional level. In this slide, we have an overview of participation in the reporting process by region. We have based the regional classification on the UN Statistics Division classification. The colour green indicates states parties in the region that were due to report and have done so, and of course red indicates the states parties in the region that were due to report, submit an initial report, and have not yet done so. So if we look at Africa on the top line, we see that there are 13 states parties that should have submitted an initial report and have done so, and there are 13 states parties that should have submitted an initial report by now and have not yet done so. With respect to the Americas, the next line, we see there are 18 states parties that have submitted their report, and there are 9 states parties that have not done so, and so on. Moving on now to annual reports. This slide gives a summary of how many annual reports were due, submitted, not made public, etc., for all the reporting years. So for 2015 to 2020. The first column, of course, indicates the year that we are referring to. Column 2 tells us how many annual reports were due each year. So you see in 2015, 61 annual reports were due. Sorry, 2015. In 2016, 75 annual reports were due, and so on. You read the column down. Of course, as the number of states parties has grown, so has the number of states that must submit annual reports. Column 3 tells us how many annual reports were submitted each year, in terms of the actual number, as well as the percentage of reports due that year. So for 2015, we see that 51 annual reports were submitted, and this was 84% of the annual reports that were due in that year. Now, I should also point out that since I presented these figures in April, 2 states parties submitted their annual reports for 2015. This is a very positive development, and it reminds us that there is always hope that reporting figures can and will improve. The fourth column indicates how many states parties submitted a report even though they were not required to do so. These are not factored into the percentages, they are just there for your information. Column 5 tells us how many states parties were supposed to submit an annual report in a given year but did not do so. And column 6 indicates how many states requested that their annual reports be made available to states parties only. And we can see this has risen from 2 reports for 2015, or 4%, to 17, or 29% in 2020. Now, with respect to timeliness, states parties are due to submit their annual reports by the 31st of May each year. We see a lot of states parties submitting their reports 2 or 3 days after the deadline, and so we give some leeway here, and basically anyone who reports within 7 days of the deadline is treated as having submitted on time. And the final column gives an indication of how many states parties submitted their annual reports on time each year. Now, just in terms of the use of the online reporting tool, for 2020, 12 states used the online reporting tool to submit their annual report, and 3 submitted their UNROCA report, that is, their report to the UN Register. On the next slide, the chart gives a summary of how many reports were and were not submitted. So we can conclude that a higher proportion of states parties fulfilled their obligation to submit annual reports for 2015, but we should also keep in mind there were fewer states at the time with an obligation to report. The analysis looks a bit different if you look at the actual number of annual reports received each year. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So, more states reported in 2020 than in 2015. But of course, more states were due to report because there are more states parties to the treaty with an obligation now. Finally, we will take a brief look at annual reporting by region. Next slide, please. This chart shows us the percentage of states parties in each region that should have submitted an annual report each year and did so by region and by year. So if you look at the first cluster of columns, you'll see reporting by states parties in Africa. The dark blue column tells us that 71% of states parties in Africa that should have reported in 2015 did so. The yellow column tells us that 46% did so in 2016. The orange column tells us that 29% did in 2017. The green tells us that 36% did in 2018. The aqua blue tells us that 22% did so for 2019, and the purple or lilac column shows that 15% did so for 2020. And so it goes on for each cluster, for each region. As with all of the Secretariat's presentations, we will be making these slides available shortly on the ATT website, so you can take a closer look. And with that, I thank you for your attention, and I thank the co-chairs once again.
Thank you very much, Madam Sarah Parker, and I thank the Secretariat. Muchas gracias a la Secretaría.
Thank you, Secretariat. Thank you very much, Ms. Sarah Parker. and Dumisani for all the work you have done.
Ahora invitar
I would like to now invite the co-chairs of the working group on transparency and reporting, Mr. Alejandro Alba from Mexico, as well as Ms. Julia Vladescu from Romania, to take the floor and introduce their report on the work carried out by the working group in the intertensional period. Mexico, Romania, you have the floor.
Gracias, señora embajadora Silvia Alfaro.
Thank you, Madam Ambassador Silvia Alfaro, Vice President of this session. We would like to thank you for giving us the opportunity of presenting our report. We would like to remind you that during the CSP7 cycle, the Working Group on Transparency and Reporting has operated under the mandate of the CSPC6, including recurrent items in the agenda. We would like to inform you that despite the very difficult context related to the COVID-19 pandemic, and under the leadership of the CSP7 President, as well as the support of the ATT Secretariat, who have made sure the ATT has been able to work properly, the working group could adapt to a remote and virtual working, which allowed us to progress in our work. On the 28th of April, the group met virtually as part of the preparatory process for CSP7. We adapted the agenda to the specific times that we had been granted, and the participants were given the opportunity to bring written statements for issues not dealt with during the meeting. The co-chairs introduced an introductory document where we set out the necessary information on the tasks. We summarized past deliberations, established items for debate, as well as proposals to be taken into consideration by participants of the group. The document was distributed to all stakeholders on the 31st of March 2021. During the April meeting, participants carried out numerous conversations on substantial issues relating to the fulfillment of ATT obligations on reporting, the different challenges with reporting the bilateral or regional assistance project for member states, reporting the modification of the different issues introduced, public availability of the reports, information in the reports, and many other issues. The details of that meeting were included in the report of the co-chairs of that 28th and 29th April meeting, and that was distributed on the 4th of June 2021. In May and June 2021, the different state parties and stakeholders of the ATT could take into consideration and bring written statements on the different items included in such report during the remote consultations that were held in order to finalize the documents that we are now bringing forward to you for its presentation and potential approval. During the remote consultations, the two co-chairs have received comments from several state parties and many civil society organizations. On the 28th and on the 29th and 30th of June 2021, the working group also organized an informal consultation on the different drafts of amendments to the reports. These consultations were a drafting session, a live drafting session, and the participants were able to exchange different points of view regarding to the draft of changes and amendments proposed. We were able to have a big number of state parties and stakeholders present, and many state parties appear to be in favor of updating the reporting forms. As a result, we reached an agreement in principle on the different amendments to the forms of the initial reports and the annual reports. The preliminary report of the co-chairs of CSP7 sent on the 22nd of July 2021 describes generally the work carried out by the working group during the CSP7 cycle, as well as recommendations to be taken into consideration by the conference. I will now give the floor to my co-chair, who will be introducing the recommendations included in the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Alejandro. Madam Chair, if I may, distinguished delegates, in the interest of time, we will not enter into the details of the report, but we will only underline some relevant aspects to facilitate a better understanding of the proposed recommendations, including of the proposed mandate. Firstly, the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted the ability of states parties to submit reports. However, there are many other challenges that states are facing, such as the lack of capacities, interinstitutional challenges to collect information, the substantial burden of reporting to different bodies, in particular for developing countries, and in some cases, also a lack of political commitment. It is therefore essential that the working group spends more time on studying this topic and discussing measures to address legitimate concerns and structural problems. The ATT Voluntary Trust Fund can be of great help in providing resources for states parties that require support to improve their capacities to prepare timely and meaningful reports. Secondly, the pandemic has demonstrated the benefits of adapting to virtual working methods. In this challenging period, when the opportunities for interaction are limited, the information exchange platform in the restricted area of the ATT website could be an essential tool to strengthen dialogue among states parties and signatory states. However, despite the fact that it has become fully operational, no substantive engagement has been observed so far. Therefore, the co-chairs believe it is important that the conference encourages the registration on the information exchange platform and recommends its use. Thirdly, the public availability of the annual and initial reports, a discussion that has just begun in the working group, is relevant in light of the treaty's purpose of promoting transparency. The co-chairs consider that the input received during and after the April meeting on the matter is valuable and brings a different perspective to the discussion. Given the concerns expressed by a considerable number of ATT stakeholders about the increasing number of reports not being made publicly available, and taking into account the limited discussion held on the matter, the co-chairs consider it is relevant to maintain this topic on the agenda for the CSP8 cycle in order to give all stakeholders the possibility to express their views. Fourthly, disaggregation of data in annual reports also goes hand in hand with the transparency objectives of the treaty. Only such kind of data offers a level of detail that allows a meaningful assessment of the information contained in annual reports. Considering that the discussion of this topic has only started in the working group, participants would benefit from continuing the analysis of the relevant topics raised in the presentation delivered by UNIDIR during the April meeting. Lastly, the use of the current reporting templates reveals fundamental misconceptions about the requirements for reporting and even errors and omissions in filing. The working group has made significant progress in reviewing the templates with the aim to improving reporting. As previously mentioned by my co-chair, the latest versions of the reporting templates circulated as annexes of the co-chair's draft report to CSP7 have participants' broad agreement in principle. These versions bring greater clarity as they address inconsistencies, errors, and omissions, and include more useful and relevant data for reporting. It is clear that the use of these reporting templates is voluntary, but it is true that it facilitates the work of many states parties. Considering that the use of comprehensive, clearer, user-friendly templates also contributes to improving the quality and quantity of reports to the ATT, it would be highly relevant for this conference to endorse the revised reporting templates and recommend their use. Against this background, the co-chairs of the Working Group on Transparency and Reporting recommend that CSP7 recalls that transparency is a key purpose of the treaty, and as such, the Working Group on Transparency and Reporting must ensure that transparency is reflected in all its processes, discussions, and proposals aimed at the fulfillment of the objectives of the treaty. Number 2, reiterates that reporting is a fundamental obligation of the ATT, and submitting initial and annual reports is an indicator of the commitment of a state party to the treaty. Number 3, expresses its concern for the low rate of compliance with the reporting obligations. Number 4, urges states parties that are not fully compliant with their reporting obligations to submit their report, or in case of difficulty to do so, to make use of the available assistance mechanisms in order to achieve full compliance with the treaty's reporting obligations. Number 5, encourages all relevant stakeholders to continue to implement the outreach strategy on reporting that was adapted at CSP4, and to use all available means to actively engage with states parties that are not fully compliant with their reporting obligations in order to raise awareness on the mandatory nature of reporting and to provide assistance upon request. Number 6, encourages state parties and signatory states to register online for access to the IT platform and make use of the information exchange platform. Number 7, endorses the revised initial reporting template as contained in Annex C of the co-chair's report and recommends its use by states parties in compiling their initial report in accordance with Article 13, paragraph 1 of the treaty. Number 8, endorses the revised annual reporting template as contained in Annex E of the co-chair's report and recommends its use by states parties in compiling their annual reports in accordance with Article 13, paragraph 3 of the treaty. And number 9, endorses the standing agenda items and the recurring and specific tasks for the Working Group on Transparency and Reporting in the period between CSP7 and CSP8, as included in Annex A of the co-chair's report. Having said that, we invite all the ATT stakeholders to consider these recommendations, and we express our hope that the conference will be in a position to support them. Before concluding the presentation, we would like to express the co-chair's sincere appreciation to all the participants that have actively engaged in the discussions in the working group or contributed with written comments or remarks. Their cooperation was extremely valuable and allowed us to advance the work of the Working Group on Transparency and Reporting. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Muchas gracias a Alejandro.
Thank you, Alejandro and Alba from Mexico, and Julia Badescu from Romania. Your Excellencies, I would like to now invite the chair of the Exchange Forum, Tom Yeeks from Belgium, to introduce the report and the recommendations are made by the forum. Mr. Nish, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, dear colleagues. I first want to thank the President for giving me a few minutes of precious meeting time to address the situation of our newly established Diversion Information Exchange Forum. For those who are not familiar with the DIF, as explained in Rule 1 of its terms of reference, which are available on the ATT website, the DIF is the sui generis body for informal, voluntary exchanges between ATT states parties and signatory states concerning concrete cases of detected or suspected diversion and for sharing concrete operational diversion-related information. In fact, I wish they wouldn't have had to do this, and that I would have been conducting the inaugural meeting of the DIF at this conference instead. Unfortunately, I'm the first chair of an ATT subsidiary body who has not conducted any meeting of his body in its first year of existence. To be clear, as I already explained in April, and in my report to this conference, it was a logical decision to postpone the inaugural DIF meeting to the next ATT cycle. I think that everyone agrees that DIF meetings need to be meaningful and effective, and that would not have been possible at this time. That is simply because we considered that the confidential nature of the DIF and the sensitivity of the information which we expect states to share requires in-person participation for a meeting to be effective, and that the subject matter more generally requires the participation of as many capital experts in states parties and signatory states as possible. The latter is also why we opted not to organize the meeting in this hybrid CSP7 format and to postpone it to the CSP8 cycle altogether. In that respect, we hope that the circumstances around the globe will allow broader in-person participation in ATT meetings in 2022 and recommend that states parties instruct the CSP8 president to organize the inaugural formal meeting of the DIF when broad participation of capital experts is effectively possible. We are aware, however, that we should not take it for granted that this will actually be possible in 2022. That is why we want to provide some flexibility on the organization of the first DIF meeting, as well as on the evaluation of the usefulness of the DIF. As you know, this evaluation was originally scheduled for CSP8 in the understanding that it would cover at least 2 full cycles of DIF meetings. Fact is, however, that if you would stick to that schedule, there would be nothing to evaluate, as the first DIF meeting will likely only be held at CSP8 itself, if at all. For that reason, we recommend that states parties decide to evaluate the usefulness of the DIF at the first CSP following 2 cycles of DIF meetings. An earlier evaluation would not be useful, also taking into account that the DIF is a new concept in the ATT framework, as is operational information sharing. In that regard, we need to acknowledge that notwithstanding our many discussions on the topic and our clear terms of reference, states might still be uncertain about the purpose and working methods of the DIF, and that the forum might need a few meetings to get into gear and prove its worth. This also applies to information sharing via the information exchange platform in the restricted area of the ATT website, which I pleaded for in April, but which has not materialized yet. It's likely that states are still timid on this subject and need more direction and reassurance. It is for these reasons that over the last year I've focused on raising awareness about the DIF, its potential role in preventing and addressing diversion, and on how to use it, both in relevant multilateral fora and in exchanges with states themselves. As I emphasized in my report, the DIF offers states parties and signatories a real opportunity to help each other preventing, detecting, and addressing diversion. But to achieve success, it is adamant that states parties and signatories make it part of their standard procedures to share relevant information with other states parties and signatories through the DIF about every case of diversion that was prevented or addressed. As chair, I will continue to disseminate this message within the ATT community and to encourage states to use the DIF, as well as to involve their enforcement and licensing authorities in this process. At the same time, I invite all ATT stakeholders to join me in this effort: the CSP President, the ATT Secretariat, regional organizations, civil society, and of course, states parties and signatories themselves. In my report, I also specifically highlight the role in this endeavor of non-state experts working with states in investigating, identifying, and addressing cases of diversion. Such experts are in a prime position to encourage the states that they are working with to share relevant information in the DIF or even assist those states in presenting diversion cases in a manner that is feasible. Mrs. Vice President, co-chairs, in April I talked about a call to arms for all states parties and signatory states to effectively start using the DIF for its intended purpose and fulfill the promise that the DIF can have a role in preventing diversion of conventional arms. There has now been a delay in the DIF taking off, but I'm confident that with the adoption of my recommendations and the dedicated efforts of states parties, signatories, as well as other stakeholders, we will be able to chair a first successful meeting of the DIF in the CSP8 cycle. Thank you.
Je remercie la Belgique pour son effort. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Belgium. Mr. Tom Niels.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Belgium, for this report. I will now give the floor to the delegations who may wish to take the floor in order to share their views on transparency and reporting in general, including the different proposals and recommendations we have been presented by both co-chairs of the Transparency and Reporting Working Group, as well as by the chairman of DIF. I would like to remind you that we have a speakers list. There are 18 members who would like to take the floor. We are going to be very strict with the speaking time. You will have 2.5 minutes. The first delegation is the delegation of Mexico. Mexico, you have the floor. Thank you, Vice Chair. It's a pleasure to have you as a Vice Chair for the day. The scenario set out by the Secretariat shows a negative trend in reporting, and it's important that the working group continue working to support the reporting task, attending to, of course, the needs of state parties who may have trouble reporting. And I would like to thank the presentation of the report of the different activities carried out in the previous cycle on the Working Group on Transparency and Reporting. Very specifically, we would like to thank and support the important efforts that the co-chairs have carried out in order to advance many of the agenda issues of the group, in particular on the updating of the initial and annual report forms, which we can find in annexes B, C, and D of the working group's report. We also think that the consultations on the possible updating of the forms have been a very wide and inclusive process, and they have been carried out in the necessary time, which has led to the possibility of adjusting the different suggestions and comments of the states and stakeholders. As such, we really do hope that this CSP7 will be able to approve the different changes to these forms and encourage their use as much as possible. This would be very important because we would be able to use the updated forms for the next cycle of reporting. At the same time, this exercise will allow us to focus our efforts in other areas that are already stated in the proposals of the group in Annex A. My delegation would like to support the mandate of the working group, and we believe that it's important to continue working on the strategy of reporting, as well as continue on the deliberations on the readiness of those initial reports, as well as the aggregated data on the annual reports. As a conclusion, Chair, we would like to thank the Chair of DF for his report, and we would like to support the different proposals and recommendations made with the objective of ensure a substantial participation in their first opening session and respect, indeed, an evaluation of two full cycles. Mexico has supported the process that culminated in that approval, and so we have a great interest to make sure that we can see it up and running as soon as possible. Thank you very much, Vice Chair.
Gracias, México.
Thank you, Mexico.
Suisse, s'il vous plaît. Suisse, vous avez la parole.
Madam Vice President, co-chairs, Switzerland is concerned about the continuing downward trend and strongly encourages states parties to submit their reports according to the obligations defined in Article 13 of the treaty. We encourage all state parties to use the means that are already available to them to improve their national reporting capacity, for instance, the Voluntary Trust Fund. For submitting the reports in a timely manner, the use of the only online reporting tool seems to be very practical to us. It also enables an easier comparison of the data submitted. Furthermore, we think that the reports should be made publicly available. Transparency is one of the key aspects of the ATT. Moreover, the disaggregation of data appears crucial to us. Only disaggregated data offers a level of detail that allows for the meaningful assessment of the information contained in annual reports. Switzerland fully agrees with the draft amended template concerning the initial and annual reports and thanks the co-chairs and the ATT Secretariat for the work accomplished. We also welcome the recommendations for CSP7, which the co-chairs mention in their draft report to CSP7, and support the proposed mandate for the working group on transparency and reporting for the period September 2021 to August 2022. Lastly, Switzerland agrees with the remarks from the chair of the Diversion Information Exchange Forum DIF in his report to CSP7 and hopes that it will be possible to conduct the inaugural meeting during CSP8. Thank you.
Merci à la Suisse. À continuación,
I now give the floor to the European Union.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. I have the honor.
Gracias, señora presidenta. Tengo el honor de tomar la palabra en nombre de la Unión Europea y sus Estados miembros, los países candidatos de la República en Norte de Macedonia, Montenegro, Serbia y Albania.
The EFTA countries, Iceland and Norway, members of the European Economic Area, as well as Georgia, align themselves with this statement. The EU supports the principles of cooperation, responsibility, and transparency in the international arms trade, enshrined in the Arms Trade Treaty. Transparency and reporting are key elements leading to confidence building among states and ensuring accountability for the full and effective implementation of the treaty. Reporting on arms exports and imports represents one of the cornerstone obligations of the ATT. We therefore reiterate our call on all states parties to fulfill their reporting obligations as per Article 13.3 of the treaty in a timely manner. In the same way, we encourage all states parties to examine the option of non-confidential reporting, which increases the relevance of the reports and facilitates accountability for export decisions. The EU supports the changes proposed to the revised initial and annual reporting template and hopes the CSP7 can agree to these proposals from the Working Group on Transparency and Reporting. It is highly regrettable that the number of annual reports submitted continues to decrease. We commend all states parties that have already filled their annual report for 2020 and encourage others to follow suit without delay and to examine sharing their reports publicly, taking into consideration the existing national practices that each state party has to encounter. The 22nd EU annual report on exports of military technology and equipment was released in October 2020 and is publicly available in the form of a searchable online database on the website of the European External Action Service. This form of searchable online database has been of great benefit to the EU in enhancing transparency and reporting, and we encourage other regional and national bodies to implement similar systems. The EU annual report displays the number and value of authorized exports for all destination countries, the type of military technology involved, and the number of denials per type of military technology and destination country, as well as the criteria that were invoked as the reason for the denial. The EU annual report for year 2020 is being finalized and will become public shortly. In conclusion, the EU stands ready to support states requiring assistance, and in this regard, we recall that the current EU ATT outreach program has been extended to January 2022. Among the initiatives that can develop under this program are those aiming at strengthening national reporting capabilities and making national reporting procedures more efficient, in line with the provisions of the treaty. States in need are also encouraged to make good use of the voluntary trust fund for the purpose of establishing or improving their reporting capabilities. Thank you, Madam Vice President.
Thank you, Ms. Marketa Homolkova from European Union. I will have to announce that the speakers list will be closed in 5 minutes. Next speaker, Mr. Rainier Schmieden from Germany. Alemania tiene la palabra.
Ms. Vice President, thank you for giving me the floor. Germany fully aligns itself with the statement made by the EU and would like to make some additional remarks. Reporting is one of the pillars of the ATT since it allows for greater transparency regarding authorized transfers of arms, including the respective national export control systems. Germany would like to appeal to all states parties to submit their initial reports as well as to comply with the annual reporting obligations. The working group has made very useful suggestions for improvements in the field of reporting, especially its revised reporting template, which we support. Furthermore, Germany would like to invite states parties to consider publishing their reports in an open format to allow for an even increased transparency. Finally, I would like to use the opportunity to make an announcement regarding the German Vice Presidency. Ambassador Beerwert has left Geneva yesterday, and our dear colleague, Mr. Thomas Goebel, has taken over his position with effect of today. Thank you, Mrs. Vice President.
Muchas gracias. Doy la bienvenida.
Thank you. Welcome, Ambassador Goebel. And thank you very much for working with us within the Bureau. Thank you very much to Germany for their statement. I'd like now to call upon Romania, and Japan will intervene in second place.
Thank you very much, Madam Vice President. Romania would like to thank the ATT Secretariat, the co-chairs of the Working Group of Transparency and Reporting, and the chair of the Diversion Information Exchange Forum for their presentation and for the work carried out during the CSP7 cycle. Romania fully aligns with the European Union statement, and we would like to underline some issues regarding our national capacity. Romania attaches great importance to transparency in arms trade. If state parties behave in a predictable and transparent way, including through an open approach to arms transfer, they can build mutual confidence, which is of great significance to the fulfillment of the purpose and objectives of the treaty. The obligation to submit timely and comprehensive reports is an essential component of ATT's effective implementation and supports the evaluation of the level of compliance to the treaty that states have achieved. We note with disappointment that a worrying number of state parties have not submitted their reports yet. We consider that the declining rate in annual reporting is a sign of concern and stresses the importance of continuing our collective endeavors to address this situation. We acknowledge that many state parties may experience difficulties in meeting their reporting obligation. Therefore, we encourage them to use available support tools to prepare the initial and annual reports, or to require assistance through the existing mechanism or bilaterally from the other stakeholders. Therefore, Romania uses this opportunity to reiterate its availability to help states requiring assistance in enhancing their reporting capabilities, both in a national capacity as well as part of the team involved in the European Union ATT outreach program. Romania welcomes the work undertaken by the Working Group of Transparency and Reporting to finalize the review of the reporting templates, and we call all the delegation to support these efforts, which are aimed at facilitating a better submission of initial and annual reports. The revised version removes ambiguous language, improves the user-friendliness of the templates, and addresses some of the challenges related to reporting. We also welcome the substantive deliberation on public availability of reports and disaggregation of data in annual reports that the working group held this year.
Thank you, Romania.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Florian Antoni. Gracias, Romania.
Thank you, Romania. Japan has the floor.
Suivi par la Belgique. Japan, you have the floor. Japón, adelante.
Thank you, Madam President. Japan would like to express its gratitude to the co-chairs of the Transparency and Reporting Working Groups from Mexico and Romania for their dedication to the work of the working groups, including preparing the co-chairs report. We would like to thank you for your efforts to finalizing the amendments to both the initial and annual reporting templates through informal exchanges. Japan supports the proposed drafts and to endorse the new versions. As previously expressed, Japan believes that the new formats of the both reporting templates should be utilized on a longer-term basis, since the frequent update would make data comparison difficult over time, and could also create an additional burden on the reporting tasks for the state parties, which might pose an impediment to fulfilling reporting obligation in a timely manner. Japan attaches great importance to transparency in arms trade through reportings, as it contributes to build confidence among state parties, as well as to promote international and regional peace, security, and stability, as outlined in Article 1 of the treaty. In this connection, we welcome the EU support to provide assistance to ATT national points of contacts for capacity building, including reporting requirements. Lastly, Japan would like to call on all state parties to submit their reports in a timely manner. I thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Japan. Gracias, Japón. A continuación, tiene
Thank you, Japan. Belgium has the floor.
Niche, s'il vous plaît. Allez-y.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I step down from the podium for a second to deliver this statement in my national capacity. The delegation first wants to thank the co-chairs for skillfully advancing the work of this important working group. Further, Belgium aligns itself with the statement presented earlier by the European Union. We would like to address 3 items in our national capacity: the status of reporting, the review of the reporting templates, and the draft mandate for the working group for the CSP8 cycle. As concerns the status of reporting, Belgium fully agrees with the assessment of the co-chairs and supports their recommendations to CSP7. Over the last years, Belgium has systematically expressed its regret over the decline in the number of states parties that comply with their legal obligation to submit a report about their imports and exports. We have now arrived at a point where almost half of states parties don't submit a report, and where about a quarter of those that do opt to not make their reports publicly available. This is simply alarming. When the ATT was signed, all states acknowledged that transparency about arms transfers was a key purpose of the treaty. All states parties accepted the legal obligation to submit annual reports about their exports and imports. The reporting requirements are not excessive. States parties are simply asked to report the quantity or value of systems they have exported, imported, or authorized, and their destination of origin. Co-chairs, we acknowledge that adequate reporting requires resources, good internal coordination, and support from the higher levels of government. This is the reason why in the ATT reporting working group, We work very hard to provide assistance to states that have difficulties to comply with their reporting duties. Many tools are available, and in our view, these tools should be more widely used. We also understand the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic over the last 18 months, but the steady decline in reporting rates predates the pandemic. Therefore, we are confronted with a structural and worsening problem. Transparency is a key element of the treaty. The annual provision of basic information on arms imports and exports ensures insight in how states parties implement and apply the treaty. When reporting rates decrease, confidence in the durable commitment to the treaty's purpose diminishes. Our delegation therefore strongly urges all non-reporting states parties to demonstrate their commitment to the treaty and comply with their reporting obligations. If states experience difficulties doing so, they are invited to seek the assistance that is available.
Thank you, Belgium. Yeah. Next speaker is China, followed by South Africa. Por favor, China tiene la palabra.
Thank you, Madam Co-President. China believes that a necessary transparency in the reporting regime can improve the transparency of arms trade, enhancing mutual trust among countries, preventing illicit transfers and misuse of weapons. China supports such a regime. In recent years, China has actively been active in the work of the UN Conventional Arms Register. Every year, China reports the transfers of 7 categories of arms as required by the register and will submit the initial compliance report as well as annual reports on time under the ATT obligations. On the other hand, transparency and reporting might indicate legitimate concerns such as national security interests and trade secrets. As a result, when implementing this requirement, we should holistically take into account the necessity of transparency and reporting and the country's concerns. China has noted that the treaty still faces challenges in the rate of reporting. China urges all state parties to submit their reports on time in compliance with their obligations under the treaty. At the same time, we encourage all countries to use the templates to submit their reports to enhance transparency. China stands ready to have exchanges with all state parties in this regard, sharing our experience and practices. Thank you.
China. Thank you, China. Gracias, China. A continuación, Sudáfrica. Seguido de Perú. South Africa, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Vice President, for giving us the floor. Madam Vice President, co-chairs, this is the first time that we are taking the floor, please convey our congratulations to Sierra Leone on the assumption of the presidency. South Africa wishes to thank you for the comprehensive working group transparency report that you have submitted to CSP7. My delegation has noted that it includes recommendations for possible adjustments to the initial reporting template and the annual reporting template. We are supportive of proposed changes to the templates that would address, as the report states in para 26, the most urgent clarifications, user-friendliness issues, gaps, and inconsistencies identified in the current templates. However, South Africa has previously expressed concern over reporting burdens across the disarmament treaty spectrum. In this regard, the undue with which the co-chairs are driving this process with the aim of having these draft amended templates adopted at CSP7 is cause for concern. In relation to its work on the proposed draft amendments, the working group report states that this task was, and I quote, carried out within the framework of the mandate endorsed at CSP6. In actual fact, the report of CSP6 states that the conference, and I quote, endorsed the standing agenda items and the recurring and specific task for the working group in the period between CSP6 and CSP7. which relates to its continued work and not to any mandate to present these draft amended templates to CSP7 for adoption by CSP7. The co-chairs has unfortunately chosen to brush aside South Africa's one specific concern, which our delegation has raised both during the virtual informals and in writing form with them directly. It's widely known that South Africa has consistently expressed its unease regarding the proposed new addition to the section dealing with scope of report in the reporting templates. Our argument remains that withholding certain commercially sensitive or national security information is permitted under and is consistent with the provisions of Article 13 of the treaty. Without prejudice, it needs to be subject to further discussion or the need for any self-justification.
Thank you, South Africa. Mr. Angus September, thank you very much. Gracias, Sudáfrica. A continuación,
Thank you, South Africa.
palabra.
Peru has the floor. Thank you, Vice Chair, sorry. We'd like to welcome the report submitted jointly by Romania and Mexico as co-chairs for the Working Group on Transparency and Reporting. I'd very briefly like to thank the co-chairs for the work they have carried out throughout last year, which have allowed us to update the report templates for initial and annual reports. We support these updates, which will allow us to submit more precise reports and which will be more user-friendly for states. Transparency and trust are key factors. For this reason, we'd like to take this opportunity to encourage state parties to submit their annual reports on exports and imports of conventional arms in line with Article 13 of the treaty. Thank you.
Gracias, Perú.
Thank you, Peru.
Yang Wang, followed by Nigeria, please. Allez-y, France, s'il vous plaît.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman, on transparency and reporting, and thank you to the Secretariat for these statistics which are of concern. My country attaches particular importance to these obligations in relation to Article 13 and transmits each year a report on imports and exports of classical weapons, conventional weapons. This report completes other reports that are sent by France on these arms transfer. It's set to the report which is sent to the French Parliament on exports of arms, the French contribution to the UN Register on conventional weapons, and the French contribution within the European Union Annual Report and Exchange of Information on OSCE. France recalls that all of these reports are accessible online, public, can be read by any party concerned, civil society, or third-party states. My country calls upon all state parties to conform with their obligations in relation to the treaty and encourages the state parties to make their reports public. Madam Chairman, my country has no comment to make as to the revised model of initial reports or annual reports, simply notes that you recommend the adoption of these revised models. France, in this respect, would like to recall the letter and spirit of Article 13, which grants a great deal of flexibility in preparation of reports without any special model of initial reports or annual reports. Thus, the recommendations should not lead to an imposition or an obligation which would go beyond the conditions of the treaty. The conference cannot impose on any member state any set format. And my country on transparency and report would like to also have the of deferring the evaluation of this forum. Thank you very much, Madam.
Monsieur l'ambassadeur, merci.
Thank you, Ambassador.
Monsieur l'ambassadeur de la France, je vous demande,
Mr. Ambassador from France, I didn't quite understand what you said. You asked to defer the discussion. Is that what you have requested? No. This deferring on the evaluation. No, not deferring the discussion. I'm entirely in your hands, Madam Chairman. Thank you very much, France.
I'd like to call upon to Nigeria.
the list right now of the following speakers so you can be prepared. Los siguientes intervenciones serían las que continúan. Nigeria, Irlanda, República de
Nigeria, Ireland, Republic of Korea, Chile, Control Arms, Acer, MAT, Argentina, Guatemala, Poland, and Australia.
continuación, Nigeria. Nigeria, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity. The Nigerian delegation extends its warm greetings to the co-chair of the working group on transparency reporting. As we could not get the opportunity to present our statement at the thematic debate on small arms and light weapons and stockpile management on Monday, we are happy to announce that the statement will be submitted and uploaded for records. We are indeed delighted to once again provide additional updates on the implementation status of the ATT VTF project titled Strengthening the Interagency Cooperation for Treaty Implementation and Reporting, which was approved for the country in 2020 project cycle as a measure of our abiding faith and commitment to the principle of transparency in conventional arms trade and transfer. The Chair, Nigeria presented a progress report on the implementation of the ATT VTF project to the Working Group on Transparency and Reporting during the Working Group meetings and CSP7 informal preparatory meeting held in April 2021. As an update, I am pleased to report that Nigeria submitted an interim report to ATT Secretariat on the 30th May 2021 in line with the agreed work schedule. The interim report covers all activities that were carried out since the commencement of the project in February 2021 and up till May 2021 when the report was submitted. Key among us, which include the conduct of the needs assessment by the local consultants, as well as the development of training manual for the national training workshop by the 2 international consultants engaged for that purpose. Although the workshop could not hold as planned due to circumstances beyond our control, it is pertinent to note that preparatory activities as itemized under Activity 3 of the work schedule are presently at an advanced stage. In actual fact, efforts are currently ongoing to ensure that the workshop holds after the CSP7 later this September 2021. On this note, it is imperative to reassure the co-chair and other state parties that Nigeria is fully committed to ensure seamless and successful implementation of all aspects of the project in line with the work schedule.
Thank you, Nigeria. Thank you very much. Ireland, you have the floor. Mr. Jamie Walsh, please, you have the floor. Ireland.
Thank you, Madam Vice President, and thank you for giving me the floor. Ireland aligns itself with the statement delivered by the European Union and would like to add the following remarks in a national capacity. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Romania and Mexico as chairs of the Working Group on Transparency and Reporting for their presentations today and for their tireless efforts over the last year. Technical discussions on issues of reporting can be pretty delicate and demanding, and none more so when conducted remotely during a pandemic. I'd also like to thank Belgium for its briefing on the Diversion Information Exchange Forum. Madam Vice President, Ireland believes that the obligation on states parties to submit timely and comprehensive reports is an essential component in ensuring the full implementation of the treaty. We welcome the reports that have been submitted. However, we remain concerned that overall compliance with reporting obligations remains disappointingly low, and are concerned that increasingly reporting is not made public. This goes against the spirit of the treaty, as many delegations have highlighted today. We recognise that many states parties continue to experience difficulties meeting their ATT reporting obligations, including due to a lack of capacity and resources, internal coordination challenges and difficulties in conducting technical assessments. Ireland remains fully committed to working collectively to find ways to overcome these challenges. Madam Vice President, Ireland strongly supports the new reporting templates prepared by the WGTR for the initial report and annual report. These amendments have been proposed following extensive consultation with states and several years' extensive work, redrafting and standardisation by the chairs. These updates will help address confusion on certain aspects of reporting, bring clarity to the process and facilitate greater transparency by states. We are hopeful that the proposed changes to the reporting templates will facilitate timely responses. Finally, Ireland is particularly pleased to see that the option for ATT reports to be submitted as reports to the UN Register of Conventional Arms has also been included. This will greatly improve coherence in reporting, reduce duplication and reporting demands on states, and hopefully will improve reporting to the UN ROCA as well as the ATT. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Ireland. Mr. Walsh. Next speaker would be Republic of Korea. República de Corea tiene la palabra. Adelante, por favor.
Thank you for giving me the floor, Madam Vice President. The Republic of Korea is deeply concerned about the declining rate of annual report submissions, and would like to stress that the fulfillment of state parties' reporting obligations is essential for the effective implementation of the treaty. The Republic of Korea appreciates the co-chairs for their tireless work and devotion to develop our discussion on transparency and reporting. We believe that the revised templates for the initial and annual reports add coherence and clarity, and we hope that state parties will approve them. Thank you.
Thank you, Republic of Korea. A continuación tiene la palabra la República de Chile.
Chile, the Republic of Chile has the floor. Thank you, Chair. Given that this is the first time we take the floor, we'd like to congratulate Sierra Leone for being elected as chair of this CSP. We'd also like to thank the co-chairs for the report they have submitted. Universalization and full implementation of the ATT is one of our priorities. Transparency is a key pillar to attain this objective. Since its entry into effect in August of 2018, Chile has submitted to the Secretariat its initial reports on transparency, and we are working on a full implementation of the treaty. We reiterate our disposal to collaborate with the entities and countries who wish to fulfill their obligations, especially those countries in Latin America and Caribbean with whom we share common challenges, as we all live in one of the regions most affected by the illicit trade of small and light weapons. We've demonstrated this willingness this year by creating a working group with Peru and Colombia. We offer a training project for diversion, from which Colombia will benefit thanks to the VTF and thanks to the program Small Arms Survey. Vice Chair, since the ATT was ratified in Chile, this instrument has been fundamental in developing our human and technical resources to update our legal regime. There has also been a cultural change in our society, something which is indispensable to promote interinstitutional cooperation and to reinforce institutional capacities. The Ministry of Defense and Foreign Affairs has helped us to modify laws to advance in the implementation of the ATT. This working group is the first political instance to fight against the illicit trade of weapons in our country. Ratification of the treaty has also provided us with new international cooperation opportunities like with the EU, the VTF, and control arms. Some of our civil servants have been able to train in sessions in Chile and abroad.
La señora Andrea Quesada. Muchísimo gusto. Muchas gracias. The following.
Thank you to Chile. I call upon Control Arms.
Adelante, Control Arms.
Yeah, thank you very much, Madam Vice President, and our thanks to the co-chairs for their sterling efforts in leading this area of our work. Given that transparency is fundamental to achieving the goals and objectives of the ATT, it is regrettable that fewer than half of states' parties have complied fully with their ATT annual reporting obligations in any given year, as reported by the ATT Monitor. More worrisome still is that the percentage of meaningfully transparent reports fell from 46% to 30% over the 2015 to 2019 period. This decline in compliance, coupled with an increase in private reporting, undermines transparency and hinders the ability to assess the treaty's effectiveness. For these reasons, Control Arms calls on all states parties to submit their initial and annual reports, no matter how late they may be. We also urge states parties to submit updates to ATT initial reports. To date, only 5 states in the treaty's 7-year history have done so. Sharing improvements to national control systems brings us closer to achieving a core treaty objective to develop the highest possible common international standards for regulating the international trade in conventional arms. Control Arms welcomes the proposed amendments to the reporting templates. We believe the revised templates will allow for more coherence and precision in reporting and ensure the templates are more user-friendly. We support the working group's recommendations to monitor their impact and usefulness. Keeping a consistent record of comparable data can help identify successes and challenges. Control Arms supports the DEF's chair's recommendations to hold the inaugural meeting of this forum as soon as is feasible, and to review its terms of reference and the usefulness of the forum allowing 2 cycles of DEF meetings. Even though the closed nature of the DEF limits transparency and inclusivity in the ATT process, we call on all states parties to fully engage and to eventually enable an accurate review of its utility. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Hein Luz from Control Arms. Next speaker, Acer. Siguiente orador, Acer, por favor.
Acer has the floor.
Messieurs les délégués, Madame la Présidente, nous tenons à féliciter et remercier le groupe de travail pour sa grande implication dans ce processus, ainsi que la vice-présidence argentine de la CSP6, l'ambassadeur Villegas, pour son intervention d'hier et sa juste compréhension du TCA, un traité dont le cœur est la prévention des graves violations des droits de l'homme. Madame la Présidente, la transparence est un outil fondamental dans la prévention de ces
is a fundamental tool in the prevention of human rights violations, and it is no coincidence that this concern is found in Article 1 of the ATT, which specifies that one of its aims is to promote cooperation, transparency, and responsible action by states parties in the international trade in small arms and light weapons, and thereby build confidence confidence among them. There are three key words here: transparency, accountability, confidence, which gives the rest of the text a clear direction for the future work of states conferences. So these words are interdependent, particularly in the context of regulating arms transfers and combating illicit trafficking in conventional arms. It is indeed the lack of transparency that allows in many situations the diversion of the use of these same weapons, in particular Articles 6 and 7, as we can unfortunately observe in Afghanistan, Latin America, Ethiopia, Libya, Palestine, DRC, Syria, and Yemen. Madam Chairman, transparency, particularly through annual reports on conventional arms exports, is the only way for civil society, including non-governmental organizations, and for parliamentarians to contribute to these efforts by the states parties to respect their international commitments, particularly those relating to international human rights and humanitarian law. In this respect, transparency is much more than cooperation or an exchange of information between states. It represents the spirit and good faith in which states commit themselves. The reluctance revealed by the practices of some states, including, unfortunately, the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council, is not new. However, their insistent demand for recognition of their legitimacy by their own citizens shows that there is a considerable room for improvement in their approach to transparency, because recognition is not compulsory. It is a free movement of observation of the ways in which states act. Madam Chairman, we are also concerned about the insufficient number of annual reports submitted by states to the ATT Secretariat. More than we have been following since 2001 what has been done within the context of the United Nations Program of Action to prevent, combat, and eradicate the illicit trade in small arms and light weapons. But I've seen how the lack of obligation has slowed down the progress expected by hundreds of millions of people who suffer daily from violence or the threat of violence from weapons in the world. Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you, representative of ASA.
I'll now give the floor to
أعطي الكلمة إلى مات for Peace Development. Thank you, Madam Vice President. Each year, the
تقارير أولية سنوية وأن الدول الأطراف التي لا تقدم تقارير تنتهك المعاهدة.
reports that are in violation of the treaty. Each year, the ATT Secretariat has had to inform the working group that the rate of reporting by state parties remains consistently low. Equally disturbing is the increase in the number of confidential reports. This is a very unfortunate situation, and we once again urge all state parties to fulfill their reporting obligations in a timely, efficient, and transparent manner. The MAT Foundation stresses that transparency is an essential element that leads to building trust amongst countries. Reporting on arms exports and imports is a core obligation of the Arms Trade Treaty and is a critical component of the effective functioning of the treaty. These reports contribute to increasing transparency in the global arms trades and serve as a critical confidence-building measure between states. Without public reporting, it is impossible to know whether state parties are implementing their treaty obligations. We believe that it is necessary to intensify training efforts to train national institutions on preparing these reports. At the same time, we are aware of the challenges that may affect the ability of states to provide accurate and timely initial and annual reports, but the number of countries today are 101 countries who are members of the ATT. However, the expected reports are supposed to be by 105 countries. That represents 95%. However, only 80 countries submitted the reports, and this is below the expected result. Madam Vice President, we would like to take the advantage of this opportunity to shed light on the situation in Afghanistan after Taliban took control of the government. So how are we to deal with the situation now, and how will Afghanistan present its national report under the rule of Taliban, knowing that Afghanistan's national report is scheduled to be submitted on May 31st, 2022. In conclusion, we recommend continuing to share experiences and good practices and identify practical measures to assist state parties in addressing these challenges and enhancing their reporting capacities with a view to assessing them and complying with ATT obligations and improving the reporting rate. We also recommend continued consideration of the situation in Afghanistan. Thank you.
Shukran, Matt, for Peace and Development and Human Rights, Ms. Nurham Mustafa. A continuación, doy la palabra a la
I now give the floor to Argentina.
Gracias, señora.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Argentina believes that transparency and the exchange of information are fundamental issues to create a confidence between countries and states. And in this regard, this was our main focus, thematic focus during the CSP6. We would like to thank co-chairs of this group for the working document, as well as the recommendations therein. And our delegation supports them. In particular, we like to encourage all state parties and signatories to register in the online platform and to use the exchange of information platform. And we would also like to recall the importance of fulfilling our reporting obligations in due time. Reporting is one of the main tools of the ATT, and the obligation of such would allow us to identify the necessary challenges for the implementation of the treaty to improve information exchange as well as designing lessons learned. In this spirit, my country has fulfilled its obligations on the basis of Article 13.1 and 13.3 and has reported the initial report and the annual report, including for 2020. Such reports were drafted by the government with the collaboration of the Ministry of Defense and Security, as well as the Agency for Controlled Material. We would also like to recall that the CSP6 report showed the concern of the state parties on the low reporting numbers. This is an important issue we need to work on because reports are not only a transparency and confidence building measure, but are also an obligation and one of the most important pillars of the treaty. In this regard, it's important to continue debating this issue in the working group in order to raise awareness of the obligatory component of the reporting duties. It is also important to update all the different lists of national focal points. My delegation would like to thank the presentation carried out by the chair of the DF, Tom Nix. I would like to support all the recommendations therein for a better functioning of the DF. On that topic, we would like to reiterate the right to the different states in the diversion issues to not make that information public, including the general comments. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Argentina. A
Thank you, Argentina. I now give the floor to Guatemala. Guatemala, you have the floor.
Gracias, señora presidenta.
Thank you, Chair. Since this is the first time my delegation takes the floor, we would like to congratulate the presidency and would like to thank you giving the floor. We would like to thank Mexico and Romania as co-chairs of the working group. My country would like to reiterate the importance of the reporting and transparency obligations according to Article 13 of the treaty and the implications therein for the state parties as well as the implementation of these obligations. Statistics shows that the reporting obligations have to be improved and supported by all state parties in order to strengthen the treaty and help to the control and elimination of illicit trade of conventional arms. Despite the fact that the reality of the different state parties is different, as well as our capacities, and therefore its implementation will be progressive. Guatemala, from a peaceful standpoint and committed with the treaty, would like to encourage that and inform you that as part of our efforts to implement the treaty, we have created an institutional group of experts in order to create the annual and initial report. We will be able to bring forward our annual report where we will be informing of the different regulation in our country for the control of conventional arms. The political will of the states is crucial, and my delegation would like to reaffirm its commitment with the treaty and the work of in this area. We would like to thank all the different reports presented to the room and would like to encourage peace amongst us. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Guatemala.
Thank you, Guatemala. Our two last speakers on the list on this item 8, and we then move on to item 4. I now give the floor to Poland, followed by Australia. Poland, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Poland fully aligns with the statement delivered by the representative of the EU. From the national point of view, I would like to add that we fully accept the recommendation presented by the respective working group. We agree to endorse the revised initial reporting template and revised annual reporting template. We agree to endorse the standing agenda items and to recurring the specific tasks for the working group in the period between CSP7 and CSP8. We fully support the initiative of Diversion Information Exchange Forum and taking into account COVID-19 pandemic limitation. We accept the recommendation by the chair regarding the organization of the first forum meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Poland. Muchas gracias, Polonia. Next speaker, Australia. Australia, you have the floor. Tiene la palabra Australia.
Thanks very much, Madam Vice President. And as this is the first time Australia takes the floor, please let me assure you and the Secretariat of our support in achieving a consensus report on Friday afternoon. I've taken the floor on this agenda item because Australia has been a strong supporter of transparency and confidence building in the context of the Arms Trade Treaty since its negotiation, its entry into force. We'd like to welcome the efforts by the co-chairs in the working group, as well as the report by Belgium on the Diversion Exchange Forum. We think the recommendations strike the right balance between the sovereign right of states to report in accordance with the provisions of the treaty, in particular Article 13, and the interest of transparency and confidence building that has underpinned the treaty for so many years. We look forward to continuing to have this as an agenda item going forward, and very much support the work going forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Australia. Muchas gracias, Australia. Hemos terminado con este.
We have now concluded with item.
I'm sorry. Muchas gracias.
We have now concluded with item 8. We will now move, as it had been informed at the beginning of our session, with. We will now move on to the list on item 4, the list of speakers. We have 7 speakers pending. On item 4, I don't know if I believe we have item 4.
And stockpile management. El ítem 4 tiene los siguientes oradores.
The following speakers will have 2 minutes 30 seconds. The UNDOC,
Women's International,
WILPF,
MAT, Nigeria, Acer y Cameroon. United Nations Office on Drug Crimes, you have the floor. Adelante, por favor.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank the President of the conference and the Secretariat of the Arms Trade Treaty for having invited us to this meeting. The Presidency's thematic focus on small arms and light weapons is at the core of UNODC's mandate as custodian of the Firearms Protocol. While the ATT establishes legally binding prohibitions and risk assessment criteria to regulate if firearms, arms, including small arms and light weapons, may be exported, the Firearms Protocol requires state parties to apply preventive measures that determine how these transfers of firearms, parts and components and ammunition are carried out in practice. As the President's working paper rightly stresses, the ATT provisions that seek to tackle illicit trafficking and mitigate diversion risks must be implemented alongside and in connection with other relevant international and regional instruments. We understand this as a call for joint implementation of these instruments. The mitigation of diversion requires accountability of all involved in transfer of small arms. The protocol creates legally binding marking and record-keeping requirements for small arms that allows for tracing. It further establishes a system of reciprocity in the authorization of small arms transfers, which complements the export criteria in the ATT. No firearm or single bullet shall pass through or enter the territory of another state party to the protocol without its consent. However, diversion is not only an arms control problem, it also has a criminal dimension. Therefore, preventive measures must be combined with effective criminal justice responses to bring those that divert small arms to unauthorized recipients to justice. The criminal offenses established under the protocol can help enforce the provisions of the ATT. Circumventing the strict export assessment requirements of the ATT can constitute the criminal offense of illicit firearms trafficking in accordance with the protocol and can be investigated and prosecuted by the countries along the transfer chain. In short, both instruments establish a complementary and legally binding framework on small arms transfers. Their joint implementation should be at the heart of any national and international effort to eradicate the illicit trade in small arms. UNODC stands ready to assist states in strengthening their national legislation in accordance with both instruments, implementing preventive measures, fostering international cooperation and criminal justice responses, and monitoring illicit arms flows worldwide. Thank you.
Thank you, Madame Simonetta Grassi, Chief Head of UNDOC Global Firearms Program, for his speech. Next speaker would be Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. You have the floor.
Merci, Madame la Présidente, de me passer la parole pour lire la déclaration de huit sur le document thématique du président de la CSP.
Thank you for giving me the floor, Madam Chair. The Women International League for Peace and Freedom, WILF, appreciates the significant work involved in producing the President's draft working paper and the inclusive way in which this paper was developed through the CSP7 meeting cycle. References to human rights frameworks and arms control instruments are indicative of the synergy that the international community speaks of frequently, but that is sometimes elusive and difficult to implement practically due to the siloed way of working. Diplomatic and practical efforts to identify and act on those synergies should therefore be encouraged. This document proposes various solutions, and this should be inspired by the existing discussions and work underway in the Arms Trade Treaty working and sub-working groups and in other fora. WILP calls on state parties to harness these synergies in order to facilitate work that will prevent arms transfers that cause human suffering and not be used as a way to merely improve arms trading or continue with business as usual. In that vein, we offer brief reactions to three of the outputs contained in the draft paper. Regarding output 2, on post-delivery cooperation experiences, cooperation around documentation is positive and can have beneficial results. While useful, we would also urge a focus on practical cooperation measures for initiatives that help to facilitate peace and human security rather than supply of weapons. Regarding output 3 on reporting about stockpile management programs, this is a positive confidence-building measure that could aid in stockpile security. If this output is adopted, WILF encourages any future reporting or sharing to be done publicly and not limited to the restricted area of the ATT website. More generally, this is a good moment to encourage ATT states parties to update their initial reports if they have not done so recently. Regarding output 4, WILF notes that this directly corresponds with the CSP5 outcome and welcomes the continuity between conference thematics. Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Madam Savak.
Merci. Next speaker, Control Arms, Mr. Ivan Marquez, you have the floor.
Thank you, Señora Presidenta. both on his presidency and his decision to focus this year's CSP on addressing the illicit trade in small arms and light weapons, with a specific focus on stockpile security. We see his paper and the recommendations included in it as a first practical step towards ensuring that the measures, policies, and structures adopted to implement the ATT will be effective in tackling the important challenge. We welcome his efforts to strengthen the ATT provisions aimed at addressing the illicit trade in small arms and light weapons by building on existing international and regional instruments and processes, including the UN Program of Action. It was also positive that this year's outcome document of the 7th biennial meeting of states parties to the POA states resolved, and I quote, to ensure that international humanitarian law and international human rights law are taken into consideration in national small arms and light weapons transfer decisions. Continuing efforts to bridge the silos between the work carried out under these frameworks can only serve to strengthen national and regional efforts to prevent the illicit trade and diversion of small arms. In addition to the illicit trade of small arms and light weapons, states parties must also address key weaknesses in the legal arms trade systems. Arms transferred to fragile areas don't disappear once conflict abates. Following the collapse of the Gaddafi regime, the weapons transferred to Libya were found in the possession of terrorist groups in all 6 of Libya's neighboring countries and at least 4 other countries across the Sahel. Today, in Afghanistan, arms supplied to the national forces are at risk of being used by the Taliban to commit or facilitate serious violations of international law. The continued recycling of weapons in these regions and beyond serves to exacerbate rising tensions and results in increased political instability and an exponential increase in human suffering. Weapons are useless without the ammunition that fuels them. For this reason, we also wish to encourage states parties to also consider ammunition in the context of its controls throughout the life cycle of an arms transfer. Diversion of ammunition fuels conflicts, facilitates terrorism and organized crime, and contributes to the perpetration of gender-based violence on a daily basis. While the ATT already requires states parties to include ammunition in national control systems and in export risk assessments, extending the recommendations highlighted in your paper to ammunition would further strengthen efforts to reduce human suffering.
Thank you. Thank you very much to Control Arms. Next speaker, Matt for Peace, Development and Human Rights. Adelante, Matt, tiene la palabra.
سيادتنا نائبة الرئيس على إعطاء الكلمة من جديد وشكرا لإتاحة الفرصة لمؤسسة ماعت للمشاركة في تلك المناقشة الهامة الأسلحة الصغيرة والأسلحة
discussion on small arms and light weapons and stockpile management. It is one of the most dangerous activities that fall under organized crime today. Small arms and light weapons have become the most used weapons by armed groups in various conflict areas around the world. Although this type of weapon is used to perpetrate most violations of the international humanitarian law, such as premeditated killings that amount to war crimes, extrajudicial executions of civilians, intimidation of civilians, the taking of hostages, enforced disappearances, pillage, and obstruction of delivery of humanitarian assistance. Among the areas of conflict affected by the illicit proliferation of small arms and light weapons is Syria. The armed conflict in Syria continues, causing a huge number of violations of the international humanitarian law and causing suffering to the civilian population over a decade of conflict through the use of small arms and light weapons, which are at the forefront of the means of warfare used by armed groups who commit violations of international humanitarian law. The same was the case in Syria, where most of the violations took place on the part of armed groups using small arms and light weapons. Although Turkey has started since the beginning of the conflict to provide armed groups with ammunition and weapons, and it is the main supporter of armed groups in the opposition in Syria, and therefore such support did not stop politically or militarily, but Turkey was the main supplier of the military arsenals for these groups, and therefore Turkey is, as I said, the main military provider of arsenals for these groups. And he does not respect the ATT that it signed in 2013, which prohibits the authorization of any transfer of small arms or light weapons or ammunitions. And although Turkey did sign the ATT more than 8 years ago, it has not ratified it, and therefore it does not respect the provisions of the ATT and continues to transfer weapons and does violate the IHL, causing havoc in the Middle East. And though Turkey is not the only country that did support opposition groups in Syria, however, it has been the main source for the transfer of arms to Syria. And therefore, we are seizing this opportunity in order to ask for more control on small arms and light weapons, especially in Syria, and we have to restrict the transfer of ammunition into areas of conflict. Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Thank you.
Shukran, Madam Nurhan Mustafa from MAT for Peace, Development and Human Rights. Next speaker is Acer. Vous avez la parole.
Madam Chairman, dear delegates, during the COVID-19 crisis and despite the message which sent to mankind, many governments continued their irresponsible transfer of weapons despite their international commitments, including those taken within ATT. The reason for which NGOs in 2006 encourages states to sign ATT relates to the need of protecting and promoting fundamental rights as demanded by the UN Charter and Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It is the commitment that they took within the UN Charter in the name of the peoples of the United Nations, the challenge in the application implementation of the ATT. After 7 conferences, state parties, many governments are acting against the Articles 6 and 11, despite the infraction of war crimes that are committed by Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and other groups of the coalition in Yemen. Some of these governments have also gone against their commitments in sending weapons to Israel with acts of crime against Palestine. France, the UK, for example, eminent experts and regional experts dealing with Yemen as to the risk of complicity in war crimes, which the sales of arms could lead them. Only the US seems to have blocked them. I would like to remind delegates and members of the conference that legal procedures have been undertaken in France and Canada on the basis of Articles 6 and 7 of the ATT to stop transfer of weapons towards countries of the coalition involved in Yemen, and highlighting refusal of governments of applying the conditions of ATT. ACER and its members like Albert Camus, think that what balances absurdity is the man that fights against man. And if we serve this community, then we choose a dialogue which leads to absolute absurdness. This text in this year, 2021, remains to date, and the responsibility of France in the genocide of Rwanda and the tragedy which is being lived by the Afghan population. We have to refuse this policy of lying, an international presence, which is the way in which a dialogue can be brought about to avoid endangering our common mankind. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, sir. And we now continue with Cameroon. Cameroon, you have the floor. Madam Chairman, allow me once again to take the floor in this work, and we would like to reiterate to you and all your bureau the cooperation of my delegation. The situation of light weapons and small caliber weapons is a threat to all regions. Central Africa, Cameroon is experiencing this. the commitment of Cameroon in the illicit situation and for the promotion of responsible management of illicit stockpiles, and thus we've ratified regional, sub-regional, and international organs for the SALWs. At the national level, the adoption of the law of December 2016 relating to small arms and light weapons and the creation of 2018 reintegration shows the shortcomings. The measures that have been taken by the Cameroon legislator for better stockpile management at the national level on identification and the stockpile management fire weapons should be marked appropriately in order to identify national stocks. The same other articles define the legal regime which can be applied to stockpile management, and weapons which are likely to be held by civilians are imported only on the authority of the administration, and all other transactions need to be submitted to legal controls by administrative authorities, and these regimes are completed by a whole range of penal issues and measures. In operational terms, the stockpile management is also accompanied by the management, and the Ministry of the Territory has registers for the authorization of acquisition of weapons, and in order to have a better assistance of arms merchants. Significant measures have been taken. The most significant, the requirement made to each arms dealer of submitting to the administrative authority a recap of all arms sold, as well as munitions, as well as other measures that have also been taken to reinforce this law. Thank you very much.
La présidente.
Merci au Cameroun.
Thank you, Cameroon. This brings us to the end of item 4.
And we finish item 8 as well. Con esto hemos terminado el tratamiento de los
With this, we have finalized items 4 and 8, and we will now take up item 9.
Las propuestas y recomendaciones
Proposals and recommendations sent for adoption at the end of the conference. Agenda item 9 are those matters pertaining to financial contributions. To proceed with this item, and given that it's 10 past 3, I would like to commence discussions under this item, and in order to do so, I will invite the Management Committee to introduce its proposal to the conference. I now invite the head of the ATT Secretariat to give us an overview presentation on the status of the financial contributions of our treaty. Thank you.
Madam Vice President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. As requested by the Vice President, I am tasked to provide an overview of the status of finances under the ATT. And in doing so, I will have a presentation that will cover certain slides that will be very essential in getting the message that I want to get across to the conference. I request my colleagues to put the slide on the board. I can't see it at the present moment. I asked the Secretariat desk to help me to set up the presentation. Okay, it would appear there are some slight delays. There you are. Thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Vice President, for allowing us to address these technical issues. The background to the ATT finances, I think what is very important for us to do at the present moment is to provide background to what actually governs the administration of the ATT finances. And the financial rules which were adopted by conference CSP1 are actually the basis of the administration of ATT finances. And specifically rule number 5 and 6 of the ATT financial rules make provisions for the formula that we used in calculating assessed contributions that we issue to states as invoices. And there are essential considerations that are critical to the calculation of assessed contributions. And I think it's important for conference to understand that some of them are that we have to look at the budget that we have for any given year. And secondly, we have to look at the number at the approved budget for a particular year, and secondly, the number of states parties that are assessed by the process, and thirdly, also the issue of the number of states that it attended the ATT conference, the last one, is also essential. So does the UN scale of assessment, because we are required to calculate the invoices on the basis of the assessed, on the UN scale of assessment. And finally, what is critical is about the planned activities for the ATT for any given year. The scale of effort, the level of ambition is important. The more the activities, the higher the cost. Probably the less the activities, the lesser the budget. As conference will be aware, our sources of finances as the ATT is directly from financial contributions by states. There is no any other source of revenue that the ATT runs. And state parties accordingly, therefore, pay for conference cost, like the conference that we're in at the present moment, and they also cover the cost associated or for supporting the ATT Secretariat. But signatory states, as well as other states who are in attendance at the CSP, also make a contribution towards the budget. But they do pay what we call the attendance fee, as well as certain costs of the Secretariat that have something to do with their activities related to conference organization. There is a process that we follow as a matter of course in ensuring that we run a very objective process of financial management. And the calendar year that we run in the ATT is that of a financial year is a calendar year. January to December is a financial year. So that is the calendar year that we run. And of course, the process, therefore, budget estimates are approved by conference, as they will be in this conference. They are payable within 3 months. When we issue them in October, the rules require that states must pay those invoices within 3 months, which is generally by the end of January. And reminders are sent to states parties in March, and that is a prescript or is a determination by the financial rules. And of course, then the status of contribution is actually made visible to all state parties and other states, as well as other stakeholders. It's on the website, published there and updated regularly. As well as we have what we call the rollover register, which is actually the register that actually indicates how we're dealing with the whole financial machinery of the ATT, and it reflects very clearly how much we have and how much we still have to pay to states and how much states are owing us. It's a comprehensive reflection of the status of finances. In terms of the overview, in terms of where we stand at the present moment, in terms of our contributions, you will notice that on the first row, we are covering here 5 years or 6 years. Now we've been in operation for 6 years in terms of finances. We've ran about 6 financial years. And on the first row, you can see the budget that states were assessed for. And it's very clear how much the budget has been. But I think what is very essential for me to say here is that the budget of the ATT has been consistent for over a period of time. If you basically look at 2019, 2020, and 2021, that is almost the same, one to one. And that is a function of efficiency that the Secretariat and the Management Committee has been applying to try to ensure that we gain value from every dollar that we spend. But however, then when states are assessed, not all the contributions that we assess them for we receive, and there is money that we receive and money that we do not receive. The second row talks about the money that we receive, contributions received. And you can see in the year that we are in, which is 2021, we have received 945,000 at this point in time against the budget of about 1 million that was assessed. But of course, then the difference between that is actually unpaid contributions, and we are reflecting that. But I think the essential point that I want to underscore here on this slide is that at this point on the fourth row, we are indicating the rate of payment. We are currently paid at 88%. We desire to reach 100%, but we are at 88%, unfortunately, but we remain desirous of reaching 100%. At the bottom of the slide, we indicate in-kind contributions by Switzerland, and we always highlight that because we are grateful to the Swiss government contributions towards this end. And this contribution has been consistent over time, and the block at the bottom, the row, is indicative of what they contribute per year. And it's important to understand that had it not been for the contribution that the Swiss government is making towards the ATT, states would be carrying that burden. But at the present moment, that burden is taken over by Switzerland. I want to also bring to the attention of conference that maybe in addition to the in-kind contribution that the Swiss government makes towards the ATT, last year we notified state parties about that. We had to move from the building that we used to occupy, which is the WMO building. We had an office space contract there, but it came to an end, and we had to move to an alternative venue, and we had to move to Avenue de France 23rd. But whilst we were doing that, we never had any furniture. We never had any furniture items, simply because at WMO, we were using the furniture that is provided by WMO. When we had to move to Avenue de France, we had to procure and buy furniture, and we never had the money to do that. And the Swiss government, therefore, in addition to their normal yearly contribution, they further made a contribution for the procurement of furniture of 52,000, which money then we used to buy furniture. And we are glad at this point that we have at least we start to accumulate some asset, and over time we'll have a very solid asset base, but thanks to the government of Switzerland. The outstanding contributions, which is basically the point that is critical over here, we are accumulating unpaid contribution over time. And we have marked them in red. As you can see in the first year, 65, and the numbers go on and on. But the total deficit that we have, where we are standing at the present moment, we are standing at 489,000, almost 500,000. That is owed to the ATT by states, state parties, and other states. That is very critical. And at the bottom line indicates the number of states that owe the ATT. There's 29 for the first year, but for the last year, which is 2021, we are owed by 50 states for the year 2021, and we encourage states then to honor their obligations. And we want to align ourselves with the call made by many states that state parties would be requested to honor their obligations. And there are implications that are in place. If we do not get these financial contributions, there are implications, consequences. And the consequences are that maybe just to underscore that at CSP5, there was a decision by conference, CSP5, that reaffirmed the application of a rule from the ATT financial rules dealing with how we deal with rollover. in terms of rollover being equal to deficit as well as and cash in hand. And of course, then the balance, we had to go through a process over time on determination by conference CSP5 to actually roll back to states money that we had accumulated, which was not paid to states at the time. But we had to have an arrangement to pay it back to states over a period of time. At the time, when the decision was made, we had 450,000 that needed to be paid back to states. We had, at this point in time, paid back to states an amount of 237,000. And over the next 2 years, we have to pay back to states an amount of 212. What that means is we will be over time paying back to states as a rollover, which is part of the financial rules, money that we may not necessarily have in our account. And there is an implication to the operations of the ATT. And they are simply that if you are accumulating a 7% deficit over time, you will have, at some point, lack of money to support financial planned activities for a year. And for the current year, we want to highlight that to conference, that if the current trends of payments remain the same, unchanged, there is, in the near future, the time when we are going to hit the iceberg. And when we hit the iceberg, that will mean that the ATT will have to review its commitments and planned activities, either by downscaling its scale of effort and otherwise. But we are highlighting and notifying conference that we are heading towards that if the trend, the current trend is not changed. The reserve fund was established by conference CSP5 in 2019. And regrettably, up to this point, we have not yet received any financial contributions towards the voluntary trust fund, towards the reserve fund. The fund is established for states to make voluntary contributions towards it. Of course, we have not yet received any contribution from any state at this point in time. And the rationale for the establishment of this fund was to actually make a provision for rainy days when we start to have liquidity challenges. We have not yet reached that, but as I had indicated, we are heading towards it. And we foresee that starting to happen in the next 2 to 3 years. What are the trends that we observe in terms of payment over the 5 years? I think the rest is detailed. We will put this on the website. But safe to say that for the last year, which is 2021, yes, we had a good start off in terms of payments. But that trend had actually evened out. At this point in time, I think we've evened out at about 88%, which is consistent with previous practice. What it basically means is that there is no change in the contributions that we receive at the end of the year, despite differences in timing of the money that we receive. But the bottom line is, if you look at it at the end of the process, we're still having a payment rate of about 88% to about 90%. Of course, then we've got the 10% deficit, which is going to catch up with us in the near future. Madam Chair, the final slide is about cash flow projection. How do we see ourselves in the current year? Essential to financial management, we should be able to know how are we going to project expenditure over the year. And the cash flow here is a function of two factors. It's a function of the money that we have in the account, and two, as well as planned activities for a year. And if you do that, you see the picture on the board. We have spent our money, and we are acknowledging that the cost drivers of the ATT are the staff cost, as well as meetings, as well as preparatory meetings and conferences. Those are the biggest cost drivers. And if they are the biggest cost drivers, we realize that for the year under review, which is 2021, we can confirm that the solid line, the red solid line, are costs that have been reconciled, and we can confirm that that was actual expenditure. But where it is actually broken, it's an indication of the cost that we are currently incurring, including the cost for this conference. We may not vouch exactly how much this conference would cost until such time that the conference has concluded and we are able then to do some revisit of the cost. Madam Vice President, this is a reflection on the status of finances, and I thank you so much for the opportunity and thank the conference for the attention.
Thank you very much. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much to the head of the Secretariat of the ADD, Mr. Dladla. Thank you for sharing with us this concerning overview presentation on the status of ATT finances. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, at this stage, I would like to proceed to the work of the Management Committee. Before inviting the Management Committee to present its proposal, I would like to provide a background to the proposal to be introduced by said Management Committee. Delegates will recall that CSP5 requested the Management Committee to prepare guidelines under Financial Rule 81D regarding the issue of arrangements with the Secretariat in relation to the discharge of its financial obligations for consideration by the 6th Conference of State Parties, or CSP6. In accordance with the CSP5 decision, the Management Committee prepared draft guidelines on financial arrangements, which were subsequently submitted to CSP6 in the form of Draft Decision 15 for adoption via silence procedure. Unfortunately, the draft guidelines were not adopted by CSP6. Considering the importance of guidelines for financial arrangements in the context of Rule 81D, the CSP7 President, after consultations with all stakeholders, submitted a proposal to states parties to extend the mandate of the Management Committee until CSP7 in order to revise the draft guidelines for consideration by this conference. On March 1st, 2021, state parties approved this proposal to extend the mandate to revise the draft guidelines on financial arrangements as contemplated in Rule 81D. Alongside this decision, state parties also decided that no state shall be prejudiced by Rule 81D in applying for support from the ATT Voluntary Trust Fund or the ATT Sponsorship Program until CSP7, when this matter will be considered. With this background information at your disposal, I would like to invite members of the Management Committee, Costa Rica and Germany, to introduce the revised draft guidelines for making financial arrangements under Rule 81D of the ATT financial rules. Costa Rica and Germany, I hand you the floor.
Gracias, señora vicepresidente. Y como es la
Thank you, Chair. This is the first time my delegation takes the floor. We would like to thank you for your leadership as Vice Chair, as well as the excellent leadership of today's session. It's always for us a pleasure to see you. We would also like to take the opportunity to congratulate and thank the President for his commitment and all the work carried out to make sure that this conference be a success. Costa Rica had the honor to work with Germany in order to introduce a proposal on the interpretation of Article 8.1d. The objective of this common and joint work has been to bring to the members an interpretation that will allow for a clear, effective implementation with everyone's commitment in awareness of the importance of this task. With the delegation of Germany, we have committed to this work after a long process in order to build together a very solid instrument. The proposal that we're bringing forward today looks for a balance between efficiency and operability without leaving behind the need to respect the different realities of the different state parties, in particular the need of those states who have a situation who have requested an extension of the payment. During the last process of consultation, we only received 3 written observations to the proposals, which was presented in April this year. The observations are in the document. As such, we are introducing this proposal today in knowledge that all the voices have been heard and taken into account. Costa Rica hopes that this document will be able to gather consensus during this CSP7. Thank you.
Alemania, Germany, you have the floor. Thank you, Ambassador Duncan de Costa Rica.
Thank you, Madam Vice President, for giving me the floor and giving me the opportunity to present our ideas that started already about 1.5 years ago and hopefully find a positive end now. Next slide, please. I just want to make a few remarks in kind of repetition of what has been said already. The proposed process that we now introduce again focuses, and this is important, on Rule 8.1d only. It will not focus on other aspects with financial, let's say, financial matters. We heard already that this document was in a previous version presented last year already, which didn't find the, let's say, necessary support. And we heard already about the subsequent extension of the task to CSP7. We tried to include all the comments we received either in written format or in oral format to identify or to finalize a document that in the end tries to maintain a balanced approach, a transparent approach, and an easy approach. And why do we need this? We need this process because any state party that may be in arrears for more than 2 years should have a possibility to fulfill or settle its final obligations. And on the other hand, the Secretariat needs to be sure how to handle any of these, let's say, ideas or ideas of states how to really get this financial obligations settled. Sorry for being a bit rough. How do we do this? 8.1d, the financial rule, doesn't say how a state should approach the Secretariat in a way to get rid of its financial obligations or settle the financial obligations. And so what we did was look around outside of the ATT, outside of, let's say, the usual rules that we all know, and we found some help within the UN mechanisms. What we propose, Paula, are you going to go ahead? So I give the floor now to Paula, my colleague from Costa Rica, who will present the process as such.
Thank you, Stefan. What we proposed is very similar to the proposal that was presented to you in last April, the 30th. First of all, to activate the process, we would need an official document, e.g. a note verbal, directed to the Secretariat of the ATT. And in such document, we propose that at least 3 main elements are present in the note. The payment plan, that payment plan can be multi-year or single year. It's possible, but it's rare that a single year plan is presented. It has to be accompanied by a payment calendar in order that the ATT Secretariat has a clear view forward on the influx of resources that it's going to receive. And we are proposing that the maximum period for the payment plan is of a period of 6 years. This is based on the other models of financial arrangements presented in the UN system. Next slide, please. Thank you. After the Secretariat receives this proposal, they have to process it and present it to the next CSP for their approval. Only the CSP as a whole can decide on the proposal, and after the approval it's received by the whole body of the CSP, and only when the first installment of the financial arrangement is presented, the waivers are enacted. So only after the first payment is due, then the state that it's in arrears receives the waivers as part of the payment arrangement. It's part of the obligations of the Secretariat to monitor the compliance with the financial arrangement solicited. Next slide, please. However, in case of an issue and that the state party that has requested the payment arrangement for any reason has not complied with the plan that has been requested, they have extra 60 days to present the reasons with non-compliance, and this 60-day period has also the purpose to give the state the window to return to compliance. In case of a continuing non-compliance, the state that is in arrears loses the waiver that has been enacted upon because of the payment arrangement. Next slide, please. Thank you.
Madam Vice President, this concludes our short presentation of the proposed process, and we are ready for comments and questions.
Thank you very much. Muchas gracias a Costa Rica.
Thank you, Costa Rica. Thank you, Ambassador Shanna Duncan, and Mr. Stefan Wilstein from Germany, from the Management Committee, for this presentation of this revised project of the guidelines. We shall now give the floor to the distinguished delegates, and we have the following list of speakers. I will read the full list so that you are all ready.
30 cada uno.
And I would like you to keep yourselves to the 2.5 minutes. This list is the following: Republic of Korea, Switzerland, China, Mexico, EU, and Belgium. Republic of Korea, you have the floor.
Please, you have the floor.
Thank you for giving me the floor, Madam Vice President. The Republic of Korea appreciates the Management Committee for its explanation of draft elements for the financial arrangement regarding states in arrears for 2 or more years. We believe that it is all the more important to lay out a concrete process and the elements of the financial arrangement, which are loopholes in the current financial rule 81D. The Republic of Korea supports the updated suggestion of the financial arrangement process. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I give the floor. Je donne la parole à la Suisse. S'il vous plaît, vous avez la parole.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We would like to thank the Management Committee for this draft decision that is submitted to CSP7 relating to the implementation of Financial Rule 8.1d. We believe that this drafted decision has evolved in the right direction over the last few months, and that the mechanism that has been suggested for the implementation of this financial rule has now reached a level of maturity that enables us to approve it. We would like to pay tribute to those who've worked on this draft. And in this context, given the modifications that have been made to the draft decision since the last consultations, we fully support the draft decision that has been put forward. We hope it will be adopted by the conference. Madam Chair, we would also like to thank the Secretariat for its presentation of the financial situation of the ATT. We can support the budget proposal for 2022, and we have no objection as regards possible cuts in certain areas of the budget in order to overcome the risks that result from a non-payment. This being said, we are quite concerned about the current financial situation, and we are concerned by the fact that more than 50 states have not made the necessary payments, and that the rate of recovery is continuing to drop. We do understand the difficulties that can stem from the situation relating to the COVID-19 pandemic, but the reality is that a number of countries have arrears that go back many years, and some countries have never made the least payment since the first or the second CSP, and have never respected the financial obligations, which are legally binding, I remind you. In this context, it's very important that the final document of this conference underscores our concern relating to the current financial situation and urges states that have payments in arrears to make these payments as quickly as possible. Furthermore, we invite the presidency of CSP8 to contact states that are in arrears over several cycles to regularize their situation as quickly as possible. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Switzerland.
Je vous rassure, monsieur,
well, I can tell you that the President and the Vice President and the Bureau all share the concern that you have expressed relating to the financial situation as described by the Secretariat and the fact that 50 countries are in arrears. And the Bureau would like to thank Switzerland for the very important role that you have played in this area.
China, please. Vous avez la parole.
Madam Chair, adequate financial resources are vital for the efficient running of the treaty mechanism. China notes the current financial status under the ATT that hopefully will draw a great attention of the state parties and be properly addressed. China would like to propose the following. First, all parties must fully discharge their financial obligations in making payments of relevant cost on time and in full. Second, state parties must strengthen planning to make more efficient use and make the most out of the contributions. When administering and using the funding, priorities should be given to developing countries' needs of assistance and cooperation. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Shishi, China. A continuación tiene la palabra la delegación de México.
Mexico has the floor.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I would like to congratulate the Secretariat for the report they have presented to us and acknowledge the efficiency of the Secretariat in the management of the resources it's had in the last few years, and would also like to thank Switzerland for their contributions, in-kind contributions for our running. And we would also like to share that concern on the cash flow that the situation that the Secretariat has presented to us, and which could put the ATT in danger. We would also like to suggest to the group, we very much agree with the proposal on this amendment on Article 8.1d. This is an issue that we have discussed officially and informally in the recent years, and we do think that the proposal we have before us is sufficiently robust in order to support it with all the membership of the treaty. As the draft project says, the spirit of this project very much follows the lines established on the UN Charter on this kind of issue, and these are usually applied. These procedures are applied not only with the UN Secretariat, but with many other specialized agencies of the UN family based here in Geneva. We therefore believe that the ATT should therefore join the same procedure. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mexico. The list of speakers is about to close. It's almost 4 p.m. There are only 2 more speakers on my list, EU and Belgium. EU, you have the floor.
Please.
Thank you very much, Madam Vice President. We would like to put on behalf of the EU on record the following remark. It is of crucial importance that the effective functioning of the treaty and its institutions is preserved and the accumulation of arrears doesn't put ATT activities at risk. Once again, we urge all states to pay their contributions in full and on time. We continue to support all efforts to enforce the full implementation of the financial rules of the treaty, as well as take all appropriate measures to improve the payment rate and cash flow of the ATT. The EU welcomes the work on the proposed procedure that seeks to establish the necessary arrangements for states in arrears to settle their financial obligations. This should lead to increased financial and subsequently institutional stability of the treaty. In this regard, we fully support the Management Committee proposal. Thank you, Madam Vice President.
Thank you, European Union. La prochaine, c'est...
Next speaker is Belgium. You have the floor.
The Management Committee for its continued efforts to reach a compromise on a difficult issue. The fact of the matter is that the financial situation of the treaty remains deeply concerning and needs to be addressed urgently. In light of the build-up of unsustainable budget deficits, all measures foreseen within the framework of the treaty and the financial rules should be applied to induce states that are in arrears to pay their outstanding contributions. And it is in that respect that Belgium supports the automatic application of Financial Rule 8.1d to all states parties whose contributions are in arrears for 2 years or more, as well as the draft guidelines concerning financial arrangement with the Secretariat. Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you to Belgium.
I now declare the list.
Al parecer no es el caso. Al parecer, la conferencia acepta la propuesta del
It would seem that the CSP would approve the proposal made by the committee. We would like to thank your very positive and efficient attitude. We would like to thank particularly the members of the Management Committee, Costa Rica and Germany, for this amended project on the financial arrangements of the ATT. Dear Excellencies, delegates, it is now almost 4 p.m., so we should like to conclude today's discussions. I would like to thank all delegations for their support. But before I close today's session, so I would like to give the floor to the Secretariat in order to make the necessary announcements on our working arrangements and the continuation of our work tomorrow. Personally speaking, it has been an honor for me to chair the meeting today in lieu of Ambassador Mberi, who will be here again tomorrow. Thank you very much, everyone. I now give the floor to Mr. Latla.
Thank you, Madam Vice President and Excellencies, distinguished delegates. I would like to make the following announcements for today. These are the last announcements I make for today. As you're aware, we always have side events that are running alongside this meeting. Planned for this afternoon are two side events. The first one runs under the title, The Role of Effective Stockpile Management in Preventing Illicit Trade and Diversion, Lessons from Sierra Leone. It is hosted by MAG. The second one is hosted by the ICRC, International Committee of the Red Cross, under the title, Support Relationships in Armed Conflict, Reducing the Humanitarian Risks of Arms Supply. So these are the side events that will be running immediately after this conference. The links to use to join these side events is available on the website of the ATT. But tomorrow then, before the start of the session of tomorrow, the fourth session, we have a side event that is hosted by the ATT Secretariat jointly with the European Union. It goes under the title is the ATT Implementation Support Project, the launch of the ATT Secretariat project funded by the EU. So these will be running tomorrow from 11:30 to 12:40, and you're invited to also join this site event. The next point I would want to make is in relation to statements. We have received quite a number of statements from SAT delegations, but others have not yet submitted those electronic statements. Of course, then we would invite those delegations who have made statements here to make those statements available to us in electronic format so that we can publish them on the website. Madam Vice President, these are all the announcements I have for this afternoon. Thank you so much. I hand over back to you.
Thank you very much. Muchas gracias.
Thank you. We have now concluded the proceedings for today. We shall start again at 1 p.m. Geneva time on item 10 of the agenda on issues relating to CSP8. I would like to thank the interpreters and very specifically as well to the Secretariat for all the work carried out today. The session is adjourned.
Ici.